The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council shook violently as red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow. Emergency sirens wailed through the translucent walls while representatives from 12 different alien species crowded around a giant holographic map floating in the center of the room. The map showed their galaxy, but most of it was now covered in spreading red dots that moved like a deadly infection across star systems. Admiral Cathera stood at the center of the chaos, her blue-scaled hands trembling as she pointed at the latest updates on the display. Her uniform, once a brilliant white with golden insignia, was now torn and stained with purple blood from the evacuation she had just barely escaped. The tall, elegant Zeridian officer had seen more death in the past year than in her entire military career. "Council members," she announced, her voice cracking from exhaustion and smoke inhalation, "the Kepler defense line has completely collapsed. Our best estimates give us 3 months before every living world in this galaxy is consumed." The announcement hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. High-pitched squeaks came from the insectoid Chithari delegates, while the crystalline Vexani representatives pulsed with anxious orange light. The massive, bear-like Ursoid ambassador slammed his clawed fist on his chair, cracking the metal armrest. The Vorthok swarm had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 18 months ago. Their ships were unlike anything the Council had ever encountered, massive biomechanical monstrosities that seemed to be part machine, part living creature. They consumed everything organic they encountered, growing larger and more numerous. With each world they devoured. Planets that had thrived for millennia were stripped bare in days, leaving only dead rock behind. "We've tried everything," Admiral Cathara continued, bringing up tactical reports on smaller screens around the main display. Quantum torpedoes barely scratch their hulls. Energy shields mean nothing to them because they simply absorb the power. Our best warships are like insects against their biocruisers. The Chithari representative clicked her mandibles rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. "What about the ancient weapons? The Nova disruptors, the stellar collapse devices?" "Used and exhausted," Catharo replied grimly. "We deployed 17 Nova disruptors against their main fleet last month. They adapted to the frequency within hours and absorbed the energy to fuel their reproduction cycles. The stellar collapse device took out one of their hive ships, but they simply split into smaller swarms and continued their advance." Dr. Velthor, the Council's chief archaeologist and historian, had been quietly reviewing ancient databases on his personal datapad throughout the briefing. The elderly scholar was known for his vast knowledge of galactic history, and his arms moved quickly across multiple screens as he searched through classified records. His species, the scholarly Lorani, were valued for their incredible memory and attention to detail. "There might be one option we haven't explored," he said, hesitantly, his soft voice barely audible over the emergency alarms. All conversation in the chamber stopped as the desperate representatives turned to him, with hope in their eyes. Dr. Velter's mandibles clicked nervously as he pulled up a restricted file on the main holographic display. "In the prohibited species database, there's an entry that's been sealed for 2 centuries. A species called humans from a star system designated Sulthree, also known as Earth." Council leader Zephrane, whose octopus-like tentacles had been writhing with anxiety, suddenly went very still. The ancient leader had been present during the original decision to quarantine the human homeworld. Dr. Velthor, that quarantine was established for extremely serious reasons. The humans were deemed too unpredictable and aggressive for safe contact with galactic civilization. But what exactly made them so dangerous? Dr. Velthor asked, expanding the classified files for all to see. The records showed a primitive, blue-green world with a single species that had somehow managed to survive countless extinction events. According to these reports, they had barely achieved faster-than-light travel when first contact was made. Their technology was centuries behind our own. The Ursoid ambassador growled deeply, his massive frame shifting in his reinforced chair. I remember the debates. The initial contact team reported that humans were the only species they had encountered that seemed to enjoy warfare. They fought each other constantly, developed increasingly deadly weapons, and showed no mercy to defeated enemies. They also, Dr. Velter continued reading from the files, demonstrated remarkable adaptability under pressure. When faced with superior technology, they didn't surrender. They studied their enemies and found ways to turn their own advantages against them. The contact team recommended immediate quarantine because they believed humans could become a threat to galactic stability if given access to advanced technology. Admiral Kethera studied the ancient records with growing interest. Dr. Velther. These tactical assessments, they describe humans using what we would consider war crimes as standard battle tactics: deception, infiltration, targeting civilian infrastructure, psychological warfare, exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that might work against the Vorthok, Dr. Velthor replied quietly. Our military doctrine is based on honor, fair combat, and minimizing casualties. The Vorthok don't understand honor, they only understand consumption and survival. Perhaps we need allies who think more like our enemies. The chamber erupted in heated debate. The crystalline Vexeni delegates pulsed angry red light while arguing that releasing humans would simply replace one threat with another. The Chithri insisted that desperate times called for desperate measures. The Ursoids remained skeptical that such a primitive species could offer any real help against the technologically advanced swarm. Council leaders of Frayne raised one massive tentacle for silence. The ancient being had guided the galaxy through 3 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. His decision would determine whether billions of innocent beings lived or died in the coming months. The humans were quarantined because our predecessors feared what they might become, he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of enormous responsibility. But we're no longer debating potential future threats. We're facing immediate extinction. If every conventional approach has failed, then perhaps it's time to try the unconventional. Outside the great windows of the council chamber, the last free fleet in the galaxy was already preparing for what many believed would be their final battle. Evacuation ships loaded with refugees from fallen worlds continued launching from orbital platforms, searching for safe harbor that might not exist much longer. Very well, Zephrane announced, his tentacles performing the formal gesture of emergency authorization. Send our fastest diplomatic vessel to the Sol system. Break the quarantine that has stood for 2 centuries. Contact the humans and request their aid in our darkest hour. The decision was made. The galaxy would either find salvation from the species they had once feared most, or they would face extinction together. Either way, they were about to discover what 200 years of isolation had done to humanity. Captain Thelvin gripped the armrests of his command chair as his diplomatic vessel approached the edge of the Sol system. The sleek ship had traveled for weeks through hyperspace to reach this forbidden region of the galaxy. Now, as they dropped back into normal space, warning signals immediately filled the communication channels. Ancient warning buoys, some clearly centuries old, drifted in formation around the system's outer edge. Each one broadcast the same message in every known galactic language: quarantine zone, dangerous species approach, forbidden by galactic decree. The recordings had been playing continuously for 200 years, warning any travelers to stay away from the humans who lived in this isolated corner of space. Captain, called Lieutenant Coxdell from the sensor station, her voice filled with amazement. You need to see this. The planetary scans are showing massive construction that wasn't in any of our old records. Thelvin moved to stand behind her workstation, studying the readings with growing concern. The 3rd planet from the local star, designated Earth in the old files, was surrounded by enormous artificial structures. Metal rings circled the world like giant jewelry, each one bristling with technology that their sensors couldn't identify. Space stations the size of small moons hung in perfect formation, connected by what appeared to be energy bridges spanning thousands of kilometers. "How is this possible?" whispered Dr. Velther, who had insisted on joining the diplomatic mission. Despite the obvious dangers, 2 centuries ago, humans had barely achieved basic spaceflight. These constructions would require technology more advanced than most council member species possess. The ship's communication officer suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the moon, orbiting the 3rd planet." A clear, calm voice filled the bridge through the universal translator. "Unknown vessel. This is Luna Command. You have entered Terran space without authorization. State your identification and purpose immediately." Captain Thelvin felt his throat go dry. After 200 years of silence, they were actually speaking with humans again. He activated his communication system, trying to keep his voice steady, despite his nervousness. "This is Captain Thelvin of the Galactic Council Diplomatic Corps. Aboard the vessel Harmony's Edge. We come seeking urgent assistance. Our galaxy faces complete extinction from an enemy we cannot defeat." There was a long pause, during which Thelvin could almost feel the humans on the other end, analyzing his words and probably scanning his ship with whatever advanced technology they had developed during their isolation. "Captain Thelvin," the voice finally responded. "This is Luna Command Flight Control. You are cleared for approach to Docking Station Armstrong. Follow the navigation beacon we're transmitting to your ship. Welcome to the Sol System. We've been expecting someone like you for quite some time." The word sent chills through everyone on the bridge. How could the humans have been expecting them? Dr. Velther quickly pulled up his datapad and began reviewing everything they knew about human technological capabilities from the old contact reports, as their ship followed the human navigation signals toward the moon. Thelvin got his first close look at what humanity had built during their isolation. The Luna Command Station was a massive complex of interconnected domes and towers that stretched across the moon's surface. Ships unlike anything in the galactic database moved in precise formations around the facility. They were sleek and angular, with design principles that seemed both beautiful and somehow threatening. "Captain," Lieutenant Coxtell reported, "I'm detecting energy signatures from their ships that don't match any known propulsion systems. Whatever they're using for power, it's generating readings that our instruments can barely measure." The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth, with human traffic controllers guiding them into a bay designed to accommodate alien vessels. As the ship settled onto the landing platform, Thelvin could see through the transparent walls of the docking bay. Human workers moved efficiently around the area, wearing form-fitting uniforms and equipment that looked decades ahead of galactic standard technology. When the docking bay pressurized and the airlock cycles completed, Delvin led his small diplomatic team toward the exit. Dr. Velther stayed close beside him, constantly taking readings with his portable sensors and muttering to himself about impossible energy levels and unknown materials. The airlock opened to reveal a human delegation waiting for them. At the center stood a man who appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His uniform was simple, but clearly indicated high rank, and the way the other humans deferred to him suggested significant authority. "Captain Thelvin," the man said, stepping forward with a confident smile. "I'm Admiral Jack Morrison, commanding officer of the Terran Defense Force. It's been a long time since we've had official galactic visitors." Admiral Morrison extended his hand in what Thelvin recognized from the old cultural files as a human greeting gesture. The captain awkwardly tried to reciprocate, unsure of the proper protocol for a handshake. "Admiral," Morrison Thelvin began formally, "I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and a desperate request for assistance. A force called the Vorthok Swarm is consuming our galaxy. We have lost dozens of star systems and billions of lives. Our military forces are completely unable to stop them." Dr. Veltor stepped forward, his forearms gesturing nervously. "Admiral, if I may ask, how did you know we were coming? Your communications officer said you'd been expecting us." Morrison's expression became more serious as he gestured for them to follow him deeper into the station. "Dr. Valthor, isn't it? We've been monitoring galactic communications for the past 50 years. Our technology has advanced considerably since the quarantine was established. We know about the Vorthok swarm, and we've been tracking their progress across the galaxy." The group walked through corridors lined with displays showing tactical information, star maps, and what appeared to be detailed analysis of Vorthok bioships. Human officers worked at stations filled with holographic displays that made even the most advanced Council technology look primitive. "You've been watching our civilization without our knowledge?" Thelvin asked, feeling a mixture of amazement and concern. "We've been learning," Morrison replied simply. "When the Council quarantined us, they essentially told us we weren't good enough to join galactic society. We took that as a challenge to prove them wrong. Every year, we've grown stronger, smarter, and more capable. We've been waiting for the day when we could show the galaxy what humanity has become." Dr. Velthor was frantically taking notes on his datapad. "Admiral, the technological advancement your species has achieved is remarkable. But I must ask, why would you help the same galactic community that isolated your people for 2 centuries? Morrison stopped walking and turned to face the alien delegation directly. For a moment, his friendly demeanor shifted, and Thelvin caught a glimpse of something harder underneath, something that reminded him exactly why humans had been considered too dangerous for galactic contact. "Doctor, let me explain something about human nature," Morrison said, his voice taking on a colder tone. "We protect what's ours. We fight for our territory. We defend our home. And whether the Galactic Council likes it or not, this galaxy is our home too. Nobody gets to destroy it except us, and we're not ready to let it burn." The words hung in the air like a challenge and a promise combined. Thelvin realized that they hadn't just contacted a primitive species begging to rejoin galactic civilization. They had awakened something that had spent 2 centuries growing stronger and preparing for exactly this moment. The massive war room deep inside, Luna Command hummed with activity as dozens of holographic displays projected 3-dimensional maps of the galaxy. Each screen showed the relentless advance of red markers representing Vorthok swarm positions, spreading like a deadly infection across star systems that had been peaceful for centuries. The room's walls were lined with tactical stations, where human officers worked alongside advanced computer systems, analyzing enemy movements with frightening precision. General Rebecca Hayes stood at the center of the room, her crisp military uniform bearing insignia that the alien visitors didn't recognize. She was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and graying hair, pulled back in a severe bun. Her movements were precise and confident as she manipulated the holographic displays with practiced ease, showing the assembled Galactic Council representatives exactly how badly their war against the Vorthok was going. "Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings," General Hayes began, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the war room. "What I'm about to show you may be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for you to understand why your current military strategy is failing so completely." The main display shifted to show battle footage from recent Galactic Council engagements with the swarm. The alien representatives watched in uncomfortable silence as their proud fleets were systematically destroyed by biomechanical monstrosities that seemed to absorb their most powerful weapons and grow stronger from each attack. "Captain." Thelvin shifted nervously in his seat as the footage showed Zeridian cruisers being literally consumed by Vorthok biochips, their hulls dissolving under streams of corrosive biological matter. "General Hayes, we've tried everything our military doctrine allows. These creatures are unlike any enemy we've ever faced." "That's exactly the problem," Hayes replied, clicking her remote to bring up tactical analysis charts. "Your military doctrine. For the past 1,000 years, Galactic warfare has followed the same basic principles. Fleet engagements in open space, honorable single combat between capital ships, defensive formations designed to minimize casualties on both sides. You fight wars like they're sporting events with rules that both sides agree to follow. Dr. Velter leaned forward in his chair, his forearms clasped together anxiously. General, surely there are standards of civilized warfare that must be maintained. The Galactic War Conventions exist to prevent unnecessary suffering and protect civilian populations. General Hayes' expression hardened slightly as she brought up detailed scans of Vorthok bioships. Doctor, let me show you something. These are detailed scans of Vorthok hive structures. Every single swarm fleet operates under the control of a central hive node, essentially a biological computer that coordinates millions of individual drones. Destroy that node, and the entire fleet becomes a collection of mindless automatons that can barely function. The display zoomed in on the massive central ship in each Vorthok formation, showing the complex neural networks that extended throughout the vessel like a nervous system. The alien representatives studied the information with growing interest, and horror. Admiral Cathera pointed at the display with one of her scaled fingers. We've identified these command vessels before, General. The problem is reaching them. Each hive ship is protected by thousands of drone vessels and layers of biological armor that can regenerate faster than our weapons can damage it. Any direct assault would cost us entire fleets, which is exactly why we don't assault them directly, said Colonel David Park, stepping forward from where he had been observing quietly near the back of the room. Park was a lean man with intense dark eyes and scars on his hands that suggested extensive combat experience. The Vorthok expect traditional attacks because that's all they've seen from galactic forces. They've adapted their defenses accordingly. Colonel Park activated his own control interface, bringing up classified human tactical plans that made several of the alien representatives gasp in shock. Instead of fighting through their defenses, we go around them. We infiltrate their formations, using captured and modified bioships. We turn their own biology against them. We make them destroy themselves. The room erupted in concerned murmurs as the aliens processed what they were seeing. The human battle plans showed small teams penetrating deep into Vorthok territory, disguised as swarm vessels and carrying weapons specifically designed to disrupt biological systems. Council leader Zephrain's massive tentacles writhed in distress as he studied the tactical displays. Colonel Park, these infiltration methods, they involve deception, biological warfare, and targeted assassination of command structures. Such tactics violate numerous articles of the Galactic War Conventions. Admiral Morrison, who had been sitting quietly during the presentation, finally spoke up. His voice was calm, but carried an edge that made everyone in the room pay attention. Leader Zephrain, tell me something. When the Vorthok consumed the Kepler system, did they follow your war conventions? When they stripped 17 inhabited worlds down to bare rock, were they concerned about minimizing civilian casualties? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Zephrain's tentacles coiled tighter around his chair as he struggled to respond. Admiral, Dr. Velfor said carefully, we understand your point, but surely there must be limits to what civilized beings will do, even in desperate circumstances. Morrison stood up slowly, his weathered face showing the strain of years spent preparing for this moment. Dr. Velfor, let me explain something about human civilization. We've spent our entire history fighting wars against enemies who showed no mercy, followed no rules, and gave no quarter. We learned long ago that sometimes, to defeat a monster, you have to think like a monster. General Hayes activated another series of displays, showing human military preparations that had been underway for months. We've been capturing bioships whenever possible, and reverse engineering their technology. Our scientists have developed viral agents specifically designed to disrupt their neural networks. Our special forces teams have trained to operate inside hostile biological environments. The alien representatives watched in fascination and growing alarm as the displays showed human soldiers training in simulated Vorthok ship interiors, learning to navigate through organic corridors and interface with alien biological systems. Operation Broken Chain, Colonel Park explained, involves inserting small human teams into the heart of Vorthok formations. These teams will use modified bioships to approach undetected, then deploy neural viruses directly into Hive node systems. The viruses will cause the command structures to malfunction, turning entire fleets against themselves. Captain Thelvin found his voice despite his shock at what he was hearing. Colonel, you're talking about biological warfare on a massive scale. The potential for uncontrolled spread of these viral agents has been carefully calculated and contained. General Hayes interrupted. Our viruses are specifically engineered to target Vorthok neural tissue only. They cannot survive outside of their biological systems, and they're designed to burn out after a specific time period. The room fell silent as the alien representatives struggled to process the implications of what they were hearing. These humans had spent 2 centuries developing military capabilities that went far beyond anything the galactic community considered acceptable. Yet they might be the only hope for survival against an enemy that followed no rules at all. Admiral Cath finally broke the silence. Admiral Morrison, assuming we can accept these unconventional methods, how soon can your forces begin operations? Morrison's smile was cold and determined. Admiral, we launched the first strike teams 6 hours ago. They're already behind enemy lines. Commander Lisa Rodriguez pressed herself against the wet, pulsing wall of the Vorthok bioship corridor, feeling the alien vessel's heartbeat through her modified armor. The narrow passageway was barely wide enough for a human to crawl through, its organic surfaces covered in a thin layer of slime that helped carry nutrients throughout the living ship. Her breathing apparatus filtered out the toxic gases that filled the air, while her suit's systems worked constantly to maintain her body temperature in the unnaturally cold environment. Behind her, 12 specially trained human operatives moved through the cramped space with careful precision. Each soldier wore armor that had been modified with captured Vorthok biotechnology, allowing them to interface directly with the alien ship's nervous system. The suits made them appear more like part of the vessel's crew than invading enemies, which was exactly what had allowed them to penetrate so deep into swarm territory. Echo Team reporting position, Rodriguez whispered into her communication device, her voice barely audible even to her own team members. We have reached the central chamber, beginning final approach to the Hive node now. The bioship they had infiltrated was called the Devourer's Maw, according to human intelligence reports. It was one of 17 major Vorthok command vessels that controlled swarm operations across this entire sector of the galaxy. Over the past month, Rodriguez and her team had successfully penetrated and sabotaged for similar ships, each mission growing more dangerous as the Vorthok began to realize that something was systematically hunting their command structures. Lieutenant Ryan Cooper, the team's technical specialist, carefully approached a massive organic console that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The Hive node chamber was the brain center of the entire ship, a room filled with neural interfaces that connected to every drone vessel in the fleet. Cooper's hands moved quickly over biomechanical controls that felt disturbingly warm and alive under his fingers. I'm accessing their command network now, Cooper reported, his voice tight with concentration. The neural pathways are more complex than our previous targets, but I can work with this. Beginning upload of the Morrison virus in 30 seconds. The Morrison virus was humanity's most devastating weapon against the Vorthok swarm, named after Admiral Morrison himself. It was a carefully crafted piece of biological code designed to corrupt Vorthok neural networks from the inside. Once uploaded into a Hive node, the virus would spread throughout the entire fleet, causing their ships to misidentify friendly vessels as enemies and turn their weapons against each other. Meanwhile, hundreds of light years away in the Terminus sector, Captain Amanda Foster, was leading a completely different type of mission. Her strike team had spent 3 weeks infiltrating a massive Vorthok breeding facility, one of the biological factories where the swarm created new drone ships to replace losses from their constant expansion across the galaxy. Foster crouched behind a cluster of organic machinery that was busy growing new bioships in nutrient tanks the size of buildings. The facility was enormous, stretching 4 kilometers in every direction, filled with the sounds of alien machinery and the constant movement of Vorthok worker drones. Her team had spent days learning the facility's operational patterns, identifying key systems and planning their sabotage operation. Tiger team in position, Foster reported through her encrypted communication channel. We have successfully modified the primary breeding controls. The facility is now producing our modified drones instead of standard Vorthok units. The modified drones looked identical to normal Vorthok vessels from the outside, but they carried hidden programming that would activate once they were deployed with swarm fleets. Instead of following orders from hive nodes, these sleeper agents would seek out and destroy command vessels when the signal was given. It was a long-term strategy that required patience and careful timing, but the payoff would be devastating to swarm operations. At the same time, in the Arcturus system, the main human fleet engaged a massive Vorthok armada in what appeared to be conventional space combat. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dreadnought Indomitable, watching tactical displays that showed hundreds of ships maneuvering in complex battle formations. The human vessels moved with a coordination that amazed the alien observers, who had been invited to witness their first major engagement with the swarm. Admiral Kethera watched from the observation deck as human ships flowed around Vorthok formations, like water flowing around rocks. The movements were so perfectly synchronized that it seemed impossible for individual captains to be making independent decisions. Admiral Morrison, how are your ships achieving such perfect coordination? Our own fleets require extensive communication networks to achieve even basic formation flying. Morrison's weathered face showed a grim smile as he monitored the battle's progress. Admiral Kassara, humans have been fighting wars against each other for thousands of years. We've learned to think like our enemies, because we've had to become our own enemies. The Vorthok fight as a hive mind, because that's the only way they know how to exist. We fight as a hive mind, because we choose to work together. The difference was subtle but crucial. Vorthok coordination came from biological programming that left no room for individual creativity or adaptation. Human coordination came from training, experience, and conscious choice to work as a team while maintaining the ability to think independently when necessary. As the battle continued, the effects of Operation Broken Chain began to manifest across the battlefield. Vorthok fleets that had been advancing in perfect formation suddenly began firing on their own ships. Hive nodes corrupted by the Morrison virus started sending contradictory orders, causing massive confusion throughout swarm ranks. Bioships that had been created in captured breeding facilities activated their hidden programming and turned their weapons against nearby command vessels. Dr. Velthar, who was observing the battle from the human command center, watched in amazement as the tide of combat shifted dramatically in favor of the human forces. This is incredible. The Vorthok are literally destroying themselves. How did your people develop such sophisticated biological warfare techniques? Morrison turned from his tactical displays to address the alien scientist directly. Doctor, when you quarantined humanity 2 centuries ago, you gave us time to study every aspect of galactic civilization. We learned about every species, every technology, every military doctrine. But most importantly, we learned about every weakness. The Vorthok's greatest strength is their hive-mind coordination. That's also their greatest vulnerability. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as human strike teams completed their missions, and the full scope of Operation Broken Chain became apparent. Vorthok fleets that had been unstoppable for months suddenly found themselves fighting internal battles as their own coordination systems turned against them. Breeding facilities that had been producing thousands of new ships suddenly became factories for destruction. For the first time since the swarm had appeared from dark space, they were retreating. The galaxy's most dangerous enemy was being systematically dismantled by the species that galactic civilization had deemed too dangerous to contact. The massive biofortress known as Queen's Heart drifted lifeless through the purple clouds of the Terminus Nebula, its once powerful hull now split open like a broken egg. Fires burned along its organic surfaces, casting eerie shadows through the cosmic dust that surrounded the dying vessel. This had been the last and largest of the Vorthok command ships, a creature so enormous that it could have swallowed entire moons, and now it was nothing more than cooling meat floating in the vacuum of space. Deep inside the dead ship, Sergeant Mike Williams wiped alien blood from his face mask as he and his infiltration team made their way back through 17 decks of hostile biomatter they had fought through to reach the central command node. His armor was scarred and dented from the fierce battle, and several of his team members carried injuries from their encounter with the ship's final defensive systems. But they had succeeded in their mission, planting the neural disruptor charge that had finally silenced the hive mind controlling this sector of the Vorthok swarm. "Command, this is Razor Team," Williams spoke into his communication device as his team reached their extraction point. "Queen's Heart is down. The command node has been destroyed. We're ready for pickup." Thousands of kilometers away, Admiral Morrison stood on the command bridge of his flagship, watching the final moments of the 8-month campaign that had consumed his life and the lives of countless human soldiers. The viewports showed the slowly tumbling wreckage of the Queen's Heart, while tactical displays confirmed what Commander Rachel Thompson had just reported from her sensor station. "Sir, all Vorthok biosignatures have ceased across the entire galaxy," Thompson said, her voice filled with exhaustion and relief. "Long-range sensors confirm that every hive ship, every breeding facility, every drone vessel has gone silent. The swarm is completely extinct." Morrison nodded slowly, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Around him, human officers who had been working without rest for months finally began to relax as the reality of their victory sank in. They had done what the entire Galactic Council had believed impossible. They had completely eradicated the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever faced. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he announced over the fleet communication channel. "Stand down from combat alert status. Begin recovery operations for our people still behind enemy lines. When all personnel are accounted for, we return to Sol System." The journey home took several weeks, during which time reports began filtering back to human command about the scope of their victory. The Vorthok swarm, which had consumed dozens of star systems and billions of lives, no longer existed anywhere in the galaxy. Human strike teams had systematically hunted down and destroyed every trace of the biomechanical civilization, leaving no possibility for the threat to return. 6 weeks after the destruction of Queen's Heart, the Galactic Council chambers once again filled with representatives from civilizations across the galaxy. But the atmosphere was completely different from the desperate emergency session that had authorized breaking humanity's quarantine. Instead of panic and fear of extinction, the air was thick with an uncomfortable mixture of gratitude and growing concern about what they had unleashed. Council leader Zeph Rain occupied his traditional position at the center of the chamber. His massive tentacles coiled around his ceremonial chair as he addressed the human delegation that sat quietly in the section that had been empty for 2 centuries. Admiral Morrison and his senior staff listened patiently as various alien representatives offered formal thanks for humanity's role in saving galactic civilization. Admiral Morrison, Zeph Rain finally said when the ceremonies were complete, "On behalf of all free civilizations represented here today, we express our deepest gratitude for your species' intervention in our darkest hour. However, we must now address the implications of what we have witnessed during this conflict. Morrison remained seated calmly, his weathered hands folded in his lap as he studied the alien leader. Please speak directly. Leaders humans prefer clear communication. The ancient alien leader's tentacles writhed nervously as he chose his words carefully. Admiral, your species has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed anything we previously imagined possible. The complete eradication of the Vorthok swarm, the devastating efficiency of your unconventional tactics, the ruthless precision of your strategic planning. These abilities, frankly, terrify many council members. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber as various alien representatives nodded or made equivalent gestures of consent. The Chithari delegates' mandibles clicked anxiously, while the crystalline Vexini representatives pulsed with worried amber light. Several council members have privately expressed concerns about whether lifting humanity's quarantine would be wise, Zephrane continued. Your people have proven themselves capable of genocide on a galactic scale. What guarantee do we have that you won't turn these same capabilities against us if our interests conflict in the future? The chamber fell silent, as every being present waited for Admiral Morrison's response. The human officer stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled as he surveyed the assembled alien representatives. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the accumulated weight of 2 centuries of isolation and the bitter lessons learned during humanity's fight for survival. Leader Zephrane, 200 years ago, this council quarantined my species because you deemed us too dangerous for contact with galactic civilization. Your assessment was completely accurate. We are dangerous. We are dangerous to anyone who threatens what we consider our territory, our people, or our way of life. Morrison gestured toward the star charts that filled the chamber's holographic displays. During this war, we could have established human colonies on every world we liberated from the Vorthok. We could have demanded tribute from the civilizations we saved. We could have used our military superiority to carve out an empire spanning half the galaxy. Instead, we're returning to our home system and asking for only one thing: normal diplomatic relations and the right to rejoin the galactic community as equals. Dr. Velther, who had witnessed humanity's capabilities firsthand during the war, spoke up hesitantly. Admiral, I must ask, why did your people fight so ruthlessly to save civilizations that had rejected and isolated you? What motivation could drive such sacrifice for those who had shown you no kindness? Morrison's expression softened slightly as he considered the question. Dr. Velthor, let me explain something fundamental about human nature. We are pack animals. We form bonds of loyalty and protection that extend beyond our immediate family to include anyone we consider part of our group. When we accepted the mission to save this galaxy from the Vorthok, every living being in it became part of our extended family. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the chamber's environmental systems. Finally, Zephrane's tentacles performed the formal gesture of acceptance that had been used in council proceedings for millennia. The quarantine is hereby officially lifted, he announced. Humanity is welcomed back into galactic civilization, with full diplomatic status and all associated rights and responsibilities. As the session concluded, and various delegations began filing out of the chamber, Admiral Kethera approached Morrison privately. The Zeridian officer, who had fought alongside human forces during the final campaigns, had developed a deep respect for their capabilities and methods. Admiral, I hope you won't mind a personal question, she said quietly. What would your people have done if the Council had decided to maintain the quarantine despite your service to the galaxy? Morrison's smile was slight, but unmistakable. And in that moment, Kethera understood exactly why humanity had been both feared and needed. The galaxy hadn't just called upon the most dangerous species for help. They had learned that, sometimes, the most dangerous ally was exactly what civilization needed to survive.